This is Felicia, co-CEO and head of DEI at SGO, coming to you with a list of 5 things your employees might need right now. Before I get into the list, I want to just set a little bit of context. I'm recording this in September 2021. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. Things are heightened in pretty much every sense of the way still. And so you may be thinking, how do I keep going right now? How do I support my team? What do my people need from me? This is not an exhaustive list, but here are 5 things that I think are super important to focus on at this point in time where we are right now in the world. The first thing is grace. So how can we extend grace and hold grace for others? This is important because, again, we are all working under very heightened stressed conditions right now, and we have been in this state of mind and body since 2020. And so the longer this extends, the more that holding grace for others is going to be critical. What does it mean to hold grace? It means have compassion for someone else, have sympathy for what they are dealing with or what they might be going through. Have some concern for them. And these might seem like pretty basic feelings and states of being, but I think a lot of times when we get into stressful situations, especially at work, we tend to be very heads down and we focus on the deadlines, the meetings, the work, and we forget that there are human beings who are in this work with us. And so above all else, to me, when I think about extending grace to others, I think be kind. The second thing on the list is empathy. Think about how can we practice holding empathy and being empathetic. And for me, what that means is how can I put myself in someone else's position and look at the world from their point of view? In the DEI work that we do at SGO, I talk a lot about this idea of holding multiple truths at the same time. And that really, to me, gets at the core of what I think about when I think about being empathetic. How can I hold a truth that is someone else's truth along with my own truth? And sometimes there's overlap and sometimes there's not. But it's that practice of even thinking through that in your mind. And this is important because each of us are going through life right now in very different stages. And so what might be top of mind or pressing on me is probably going to be really different than from what is going on with you or your employees or someone else who reports to you or that you work with or interact with. And so we have to practice this skill. And I think this is a really important skill that doesn't get focused on as much as it should, because it tends to get lumped into that area of soft skills. And so in school, in professional environments and practice, we don't always tend to keep empathy in mind, but try to think about how can we practice empathy for others. The next thing on the list is appreciation. Now, if you're like me, you appreciate every single person who you work with, and hopefully that's true for you. But if you're like me, you may not always take the time to actually express that. And it might be something that lives more at a mental level as opposed to expressing it outwardly. Appreciation can come in a lot of different forms. It can be as simple as a word of thanks, thanking someone for showing up, for completing a project, for hitting a deadline, whatever that might be, simply thanking them. And that thanks could and should be both on a one-to-one level, and it should also be public. And so if it's something that affects the team, or even if it's not, just share that out with the rest of your group, your department, your team, whatever that might look like. For me at SGO, I try to remember and practice giving thanks to each of my team members in a myriad of different ways, whether that's a text message, a verbal thanks one-on-one in a meeting, a shout out in our Slack channel. We have a literal shout out channel dedicated just to this purpose. It could also take the form beyond just words, and it could be monetary. So perhaps that looks like giving someone a spot bonus or a raise. Appreciating them in a way that shows not just your verbal thanks, but also that you want them to stay, that you're appreciating them, that you're giving them financial funding to support them in whatever stage of life, personally and professionally, they're at. And appreciation could also come in the form of additional benefits, expanded access, whatever that looks like to you. And this might be something that varies widely depending on the resources that are available to you. But remember, at the end of the day, it can be as simple as thank you, I appreciate you. The next thing I want to share on this list is support for mental health. I feel like a lot of times, especially when we start talking about benefits and health, when we're talking about those concepts in a workplace context, we focus on physical health. And so we think about a gym membership, a bike membership, a rebate if you are working out, whatever that might look like. But mental health is probably just as, if not more important these days. And so take a look at your benefits and see, do you have benefits that cover and support mental health? And beyond that, there's also another element there too, which I think of as an element of transparency and vulnerability, because sometimes there's a stigma that gets associated with mental health, especially mental health in the workplace. And I think you'll find that a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about mental health or sharing mental health with colleagues, with their boss, with work friends. And so for me, in my position as a leader at my company, I have therapy that I go to weekly. And I don't beat this around the bush, but I take time to share if I'm going to be offline for a little bit, and I explain why. And people know that that's something that's important to me. And the reason I do that is because it may never come up again. But my hope is that it normalizes talking about this, and it normalizes this practice of holding space for your mental health. And it shows that as a company, as a person, as a leader, I value that, and I will provide support for others who may need that help as well. And so, in addition to everything I've just said, support for mental health could also look like talk therapy support from a financial standpoint at the company level. It could look like mental health days off and normalizing that practice of taking a mental health day off. It could also, again, just be being really transparent around this and why it's important, and that it is important. And then finally, the last item on the list is flexibility. If anything else, this time in our lives has taught us that we can't always anticipate what is going to happen. And so because that's the reality that we are living in, that we've always lived with, we have to build in this idea that we're going to be flexible, and we can be flexible. We can pivot quickly if need be. And that process might look messy. It might not be perfect, but it's really important to think about that, because from a business standpoint, you want to be thinking about this really at all times. It's that idea and that practice of thinking through what could happen. What's my plan B? What's my plan C? What's my plan D? And adjusting on the fly. And then I think at an organizational level, at a team level, you want to make sure that you're discussing backup plans with your team members, and that you're discussing what it looks like to be flexible, what that feels like, how that might show up, how that might play out. Because if nothing else, pandemic aside, we know that life is messy and things happen. And so if we've already thought through how we can adjust quickly, and if we built in support structures for that, then we'll be better off in the long run, no matter what. So those are my 5 things that I think your employees need right now: grace, empathy, appreciation, support for mental health, and flexibility. Do you agree? Would there be anything else that you would add to the list? Would love to hear from you. Let us know.